Colonel David Carter, a highly decorated Army officer, had seen his fair share of difficult situations, but nothing prepared him for the events that unfolded at the airport one evening. Carter, who had spent years serving his country with dedication, was on a solemn mission. He was escorting the remains of Private First Class Jason Reynolds, a 21-year-old soldier who had lost his life in service to his country. As he entered the busy terminal in Charlotte, North Carolina, he had no reason to suspect that the trip would turn into a test of his patience, dignity, and perseverance. Carter approached the airline counter, presenting his military orders and ID to the agent. But instead of receiving the respect he deserved, the airline staff hesitated, exchanged glances, and informed him there was an issue with his ticket. Confused, he stood his ground, explaining that he was on official military duty and had all the necessary documentation. The agent, however, repeatedly cited an ambiguous security protocol, refusing to let him board the flight. Despite his calm demeanor, Carter's frustration grew, but he refused to let anger take control. As Carter stood firm, the atmosphere around him began to shift. Passengers in the terminal, who had noticed the unjust treatment, began to speak up. A Marine veteran, observing the situation, confronted the airline staff, demanding to know why a soldier escorting the remains of a fallen comrade was being denied his flight. This sparked a wave of support, as more people began to speak out, record videos, and ask questions. The quiet murmurs in the terminal grew louder, and soon the story was gaining traction on social media. The pressure on the airline was building. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the airline representatives scrambled for damage control. As the tension in the terminal mounted, a military officer arrived to intervene. Major Thomas Beckett, representing the U.S. Army, quickly arranged for a private military flight to take Carter and the remains of Private Reynolds home. The airline's mishandling of the situation had been exposed, and the public was watching. The incident not only embarrassed the airline but also underscored the lack of respect for those who serve in the military. As the story spread, the airline faced swift backlash. Videos of the incident were shared online, and protests calling for accountability grew louder. The airline was forced to issue public apologies and suspend the employees involved. However, the true victory lay not in the airline's apology but in the public outcry that held them accountable. Colonel Carter's unwavering stance and the support of the public sent a clear message that military personnel, especially those escorting fallen soldiers, deserve respect, regardless of race or background. The incident proved to be a turning point in raising awareness of the issues faced by those who serve in the military. It wasn't just about getting Carter on his flight, it was about ensuring that the sacrifice of soldiers like Private Reynolds was honored and respected. Carter's calm composure and refusal to back down, along with the voices of those who stood up for him, demonstrated that when people unite against injustice, change can happen. This powerful moment not only changed the course of the situation but also sent a lasting message about the importance of respect, integrity, and accountability in society. Colonel David Carter, a seasoned Army officer, was no stranger to difficult situations, but nothing could have prepared him for the experience he had at a Charlotte, North Carolina airport. He had just finished an important meeting with community leaders and was escorting the remains of Private First Class Jason Reynolds, a fallen soldier. As Carter entered the busy terminal, he did not expect his mission to be met with anything other than respect. But when he approached the airline counter to board his flight, he was met with unexpected resistance. Despite presenting his military orders and identification, the airline agent hesitated before telling him that there was an issue with his ticket and that he could not board at that time. The agent's response, which involved a vague security protocol, made no sense to Carter, especially considering the documents he had presented were in perfect order. Despite his calm demeanor, Carter was frustrated. This was not just about a flight, it was about the solemn duty he had to honor a fallen soldier. He demanded an explanation, but the airline staff remained firm, refusing to let him board. As Carter stood his ground, passengers in the terminal began to notice. A man in his 60s, a Marine veteran, spoke up, questioning why a soldier escorting the remains of another soldier would be denied a flight. His voice caught the attention of others, and soon, people began recording the interaction. The situation, which had begun as a small confrontation, quickly escalated into a public spectacle. The tension in the terminal grew as more and more people spoke out in support of Carter, demanding answers from the airline staff. It became clear that the issue wasn't about protocol or security measures, it was about something deeper: racial profiling. The airline staff, initially dismissive, began to realize that their actions were being observed by an increasingly vocal group of people, and the situation was spiraling out of control. As more passengers voiced their outrage, the airline staff scrambled to resolve the issue. After a few moments, a senior military officer, Major Thomas Beckett, arrived at the scene, quickly arranging for a private military flight to transport Carter and the remains of Private Reynolds. But the damage had already been done. The story spread quickly across social media, sparking widespread outrage. The airline was forced to issue an apology, and within days, their stock value plummeted. The incident led to protests and calls for better treatment of military personnel. More importantly, it exposed the biases and systemic issues that still exist within institutions, even in places that should be neutral, like airports. This experience was not only about one man's struggle to board a flight but about standing up against injustice. It was a powerful reminder that systemic racism and profiling can be challenged when people stand together and speak out. The support Carter received from the public, especially the Marine veteran and other passengers, showed that when ordinary people choose to fight for what's right, they can demand accountability and change. Carter's calm and firm response to the injustice he faced highlighted the importance of respect for everyone, especially those who serve in the military. This event served as a powerful message that we must continue to challenge unjust systems, ensuring that respect and equality are the standard for all. The situation involving Colonel David Carter at the airport serves as a striking example of how public awareness and accountability can shift the course of an injustice. When Carter, a highly decorated Army officer, was unfairly denied boarding while escorting the remains of a fallen soldier, the staff at the airline believed they could quietly enforce a policy that discriminated against him without consequence. What they didn't anticipate was the growing awareness of the passengers around them, who were watching the injustice unfold. As the incident escalated, people began to speak up, recording the event and sharing it with others. This public attention not only exposed the unjust treatment Carter faced but also put pressure on the airline staff to respond to the public's outcry. The tipping point came when a Marine veteran, seated nearby, spoke out against the treatment of Carter, calling attention to the blatant disrespect shown to a soldier escorting the remains of another soldier. His words sparked a ripple effect throughout the terminal, as more and more people began to voice their support. This moment demonstrated the power of collective action. When individuals come together to demand fairness, they can hold institutions accountable. As more people recorded the interaction, it soon spread across social media platforms, amplifying the message. The viral attention turned a small dispute into a nationwide conversation about racial profiling, inequality, and the treatment of military personnel. The airline's attempts to downplay the situation quickly fell apart as it became clear that they could no longer control the narrative. This collective awareness did not just expose the airline's mistake but forced them to take responsibility. The sudden shift in the situation, with passengers speaking out and sharing the incident, sent a strong message: systemic biases cannot go unnoticed, especially when the public is watching. The airline's initial reluctance to act responsibly revealed the systemic issues that allow such treatment to occur. However, the pressure from the public and the media eventually led the airline to issue an apology and offer an alternative means of transport for Colonel Carter and the remains of Private Reynolds. But the damage to the airline's reputation was already done. The public's response forced the airline to confront their own role in perpetuating these discriminatory practices. Furthermore, the incident highlighted the importance of leadership in ensuring that public institutions uphold the values of equality and respect. When Carter was finally recognized as the chief of police, a leader within the community, the narrative shifted. It was no longer just about a single man's experience, it became a reflection of a much broader societal issue. The public scrutiny brought attention to the lack of accountability within institutions, and this realization prompted real change. The airline's CEO had to address the situation publicly, acknowledging the missteps and offering solutions, including suspending the employees involved. But more importantly, it sparked larger conversations about the treatment of military personnel and racial biases in society. The pressure exerted by the public and the media ensured that accountability was not just a hollow promise but a necessary response to a situation that was unjust from the start. This powerful incident serves as a reminder that public awareness can have a profound impact on demanding accountability. It shows that when ordinary people, empowered by the information they share and the voices they raise, come together to expose injustices, real change can happen. It's no longer enough for powerful institutions to hide behind policies or vague explanations, they are held to a higher standard by the public that demands respect, fairness, and equality for all. The incident involving Colonel David Carter at the airport also emphasizes the pivotal role that leadership plays in fostering accountability and shaping the culture of institutions. As a respected leader within his community, Colonel Carter's composed demeanor throughout the entire ordeal became a testament to the values he had cultivated in his career: integrity, respect, and professionalism. His patience in the face of injustice not only showcased his personal discipline but also highlighted a broader point: effective leadership is essential for ensuring fairness, especially when systemic biases come into play. At first, the airline staff, led by a supervisor, tried to downplay the situation, hiding behind vague explanations and policies. But when the public began to notice and the story started to gain traction, the narrative shifted. Leadership within the community, in the form of Colonel Carter's steadfastness, made sure the issue did not slip under the radar. As the situation escalated, it wasn't just Carter's calm presence that made a difference, it was the leadership of those who stood up to support him. The Marine veteran, a figure of authority within his own right, took the initiative to call out the mistreatment. His actions revealed an important principle: leadership is not always about holding a formal title, but about standing up for what is right, especially in difficult moments. His decision to speak up in front of everyone gave others the courage to follow suit. The collective action of the public, fueled by the leadership of a few key figures, turned the tide of the situation. The airline staff, who had initially shown indifference, now found themselves on the receiving end of intense scrutiny. The airline supervisor, faced with the rising pressure, had no choice but to attempt damage control, though it was too late to quell the storm. The powerful lesson here is that true leadership means having the courage to act and speak out when injustice is evident, regardless of the personal consequences. The individuals who stepped up, whether they held an official position or not, demonstrated that leadership is a shared responsibility. When Colonel Carter was revealed to be the police chief, his leadership in his professional capacity became even clearer. It wasn't just his military rank or the badges he wore that commanded respect, it was the integrity and the sense of justice that he carried into every situation. His restraint during the ordeal served as an example to both the passengers and the airline staff of the strength that true leadership holds. It also set the stage for him to take the necessary steps to address the deeper issues within the institution he was a part of. Once the facts became clear, and the involvement of leadership was exposed, the airport's leadership had to step up to the plate. In this case, the role of a true leader was demonstrated by Major Thomas Beckett, who swiftly intervened, ensuring that the situation was corrected. The decisive actions of Beckett further reinforced the idea that accountability, when exercised properly by those in positions of authority, can correct injustices. Leadership isn't just about enforcing policies, it's about standing for what is right, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. Beckett's swift actions, facilitating Carter's travel without further delay and correcting the behavior of the airline staff, showed that accountability is a key responsibility for all leaders, regardless of their domain. The event demonstrated that leadership is a cornerstone of accountability. Those in power, whether in formal positions or not, must set the example. When leadership fails to address injustice, it not only damages the individual affected but also the institution itself. However, when leadership is exercised with integrity, it has the power to heal, correct, and create meaningful change. Colonel Carter's handling of the situation, supported by the leadership of others around him, proved that real leadership isn't about titles, it's about the actions that speak louder than words. The incident at the airport not only highlighted the mistreatment of Colonel David Carter but also brought to light the power of collective action and its potential to drive change. What began as an isolated case of racial profiling soon became a public spectacle, demonstrating the influence of a community that refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. As the situation escalated, more and more people in the terminal began to take notice and speak out. The story of Colonel Carter, a decorated military officer being denied his rightful place on a flight while escorting the remains of a fallen soldier, quickly gained traction when fellow passengers, a Marine veteran in particular, took the initiative to voice their concern. This shift in the environment in the terminal wasn't just about a single person's stance, it was about the growing recognition of the injustice and the collective will of ordinary people standing together to right the wrong. The Marine, who had likely seen countless instances of injustice, made it clear to the airline staff that this wasn't just about one person, it was about respect for the military, and the public wasn't going to stand idly by. As the incident gathered more attention, passengers began pulling out their phones to record the event. The power of social media cannot be underestimated in situations like this. A single tweet, "They just denied a black U.S. Army colonel his flight while escorting a fallen soldier's remains," set off a viral chain of events that went far beyond the confines of the airport terminal. The story spread quickly, causing public outrage, especially when it was revealed that the airline staff had tried to downplay the situation with vague explanations and half-hearted apologies. Social media was the catalyst that turned the situation from a personal grievance into a public movement. The hashtag Let Him Fly quickly gained momentum, and it became clear that the airline had lost control of the narrative. The more people spoke up, the more the momentum shifted in favor of Colonel Carter, and the airline found itself under increasing scrutiny. This story serves as a stark reminder of the power of collective action in shaping public discourse. As people stood up and spoke out against the mistreatment of Colonel Carter, they not only gave a voice to one man but also highlighted broader issues of racial profiling and systemic bias. The people in the terminal, whether they were veterans, fellow travelers, or ordinary citizens, showed the power of unity. Their voices amplified what would have otherwise been dismissed as an isolated incident. This type of collective action, fueled by empathy and a shared sense of justice, had the power to challenge the status quo. It forced the airline to take action, though initially, it seemed reluctant to do so. By the time the incident reached the public's eye, the airline had no choice but to attempt damage control. But the damage was already done. The public had spoken, and the pressure for accountability was unrelenting. The media had picked up the story, politicians and veteran advocacy groups had joined the conversation, and the public outcry was deafening. The airline stock dropped, and their reputation took a massive hit. The consequences of this mistreatment were swift, and the once marginalized voices had now become a force that couldn't be ignored. This incident, ignited by the collective will of the public, forced the airline to confront its own biases and make difficult decisions. It was a powerful lesson in how the voices of ordinary people, when united and amplified, can create lasting change and ensure that accountability is not just a promise but a reality. The incident with Colonel David Carter didn't just affect him personally, it had far-reaching corporate and public consequences that would reverberate long after the airport incident. What started as a single, seemingly insignificant act of racial profiling quickly escalated into a public relations nightmare for the airline involved. The initial denial of Carter's flight sparked outrage, but it wasn't just the mistreatment of a decorated military officer that caused the uproar. It was the blatant disregard for the dignity and respect that soldiers, particularly African American soldiers, deserve. The growing public backlash quickly shifted the focus onto the airline's handling of the situation, exposing systemic issues in how it treated people of color, especially veterans. As the incident gained traction on social media, it snowballed into a crisis for the airline. Passengers recording the incident, coupled with the power of social media, turned the story into a viral sensation. The airline's attempts to downplay the situation only worsened its image, as their weak apologies and lack of accountability were met with widespread anger. The public began demanding answers, and the story was picked up by media outlets across the country. The hashtag #LetHimFly became a rallying cry for people calling for change, and the airline found itself in an ever-tightening grip of public outrage. This led to a sharp decline in the airline's stock value, further evidence of the public's rejection of how the situation was handled. The company's failure to act quickly and appropriately only increased the pressure. Political figures, veteran advocacy groups, and ordinary citizens were all calling for accountability. Ultimately, the incident forced the airline to suspend employees and apologize publicly, but by then, the damage was done. The public consequences were irreversible, as the company faced both a loss of reputation and financial ramifications. The corporate consequences were clear: poor treatment of individuals, particularly veterans, would no longer be tolerated, and this event became a stark reminder that accountability must be swift and genuine to avoid long-lasting repercussions.